The Sine Institute of Policy and Politics is American University's incubator for policy innovation. We convene leaders in the academic, public, private, nonprofit, and journalism sectors to engage and promote common ground and nonpartisan solutions. In an evolving world, we seize the opportunity to work on the nation's most pressing challenges through collaboration by experts and top scholars in their field with students in research and scholarship. As part of that goal, the Sine Institute leverages American University's location in our nation's capital, the nexus of government and a growing international business center. We connect diverse perspectives from around the country and around the world with our world-class academics and research, experienced practitioners, and the most politically active student body in the U.S. We stand apart through our focus on the role of business and the nonprofit community in public policy, the rise of the importance of economic regions in the United States, and international policy issues. Our focus is to make an immediate impact at the intersection of policy and politics that leads to real and lasting change. Thank you for joining us as we convene, communicate, and collaborate. And now introducing 2023 Sine Fellow, the Honorable Doug Ducey.
We ready to start? Great. Hi, everybody. Hello. Welcome on this beautiful, I don't know if it's spring, I don't know if it's summer yet. We're trying to decide day. We're so glad you're all here to have this career conversation with Governor Ducey. This is his final, unfortunately, session with us, but I just informed him that as an alumni, soon to be, of the Fellows Program, he'll be doing lots with us on campus. We're going to invite him back again. He seems fully caffeinated, so I think we're ready to go. This is the first of our Career Conversations program, and I just want to give you a little insight into, we heard from you students from past Fellows sessions. What you really wanted is, we've got the opportunity, we've got these amazing people who have had amazing careers. We want to learn from you, your career path, leadership. So that's what this is about. We can also talk about policy at any time. You know, I love to, but this is really about you asking those questions of individuals who have been there and done that. The other part of the career conversation that we're really excited about is we welcomed alumni of American University to come and moderate the conversation. We're so proud of our alums. We are so proud of the individuals who walked around campus like you did and are now doing incredible, exciting things. So this is in co-sponsorship with the American University's Career Center and with the American University Alumni Association. Now, I encourage you, we've got a table full of information afterward, and I'll tell you a little bit about the program afterward as well, and look forward to having you. But today, I get to introduce our moderator, who is with us, and he's with us virtually, but we're so glad to see you, and thank you so much for taking the time. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Kevin Malecek, and he is, okay, you're like a double eagle. Correct?
I'm a double eagle, yes. Yeah.
Double eagle, ladies and gentlemen. He actually has received his BA in History and Political Science from American University in 2001. I'm going to drop numbers because you're younger than I am. And his MA in Political Science in 2002. So welcome to another eagle. Let me tell you a little bit about Kevin. He has more than 15 years, and I have to read it because it's so much, guys. I couldn't memorize this. He has more than 15 years of experience and expertise in a variety of areas, including federal, state, and local government. He's served as an elected official as the president and District 3 councilman for the Willoughby Hills, Ohio City Council. So we have a public official here for 10 years, and as Lake County, Ohio commissioner for 2 years. He's an experienced government and nonprofit chief executive, economic development professional, administrator, and higher education professional. We thought he would be a perfect match for somebody we're very proud to have on campus, our Sine Fellow, Governor Doug Ducey, who was elected to Arizona as the 23rd governor in 2014 and reelected in 2018 with more votes than anyone in state history. We must be really proud of that. So, and it was obviously a consensus of people all across the aisle from all parts of the state supported you. And upon election, Arizona had a $1 billion deficit and a sluggish economy. And today, Arizona has a record surplus, a balanced budget, and a booming economy. The interesting thing as well is, who here likes ice cream? I like ice cream. He is the former businessman and CEO of Cold Stone Creamery, who today also serves as chairman. He has served as chairman of the Republican Governors Association. So I think having Governor Ducey here talk about leadership is so important. He's worked in the public sector. He's worked in the private sector. Guess what? You get to ask him today about both. But first, we're going to have Kevin moderate the conversation. Kevin, welcome to us virtually. We'd really love to hear the questions that you want to ask the governor, and then we'll open it up for questions in a little while.
Absolutely, Amy. Hello, everybody virtually from a I think slightly colder Ohio, but definitely than at least from DC, but definitely colder than Arizona, Governor. Ohio here today. Glad to be with you. I know that room, that venue where you are very well. We used to have student government meetings when I was there, when that was recently renovated. So, started that path when I was at American, and happy to continue to give back. I'm still teaching in SBA every once in a while as well, but happy to be here, Governor. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually. I've watched your career and your rise from afar, and it's refreshing seeing someone that has been such a successful private sector CEO move into the governorship and really make Arizona an economic powerhouse, one that we compete with here in Ohio. But I will tell you, we're not trying to steal any of your businesses. I promise you that, at least. So, but just have a few questions for you, and then obviously we can kind of open up to the audience, and they can answer questions that they may have about your progression and so forth. So tell us a little about you. You've got this very interesting career path of being a very successful corporate CEO and then also governor of the state. What inspired you to kind of pursue that career path, and how did you kind of get started, I guess, not only with the Cold Stone CEO position? I know you were at Procter & Gamble before as well, but also your start in politics. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. And thank you, Kevin. Thanks for moderating. We have some things in common. I actually grew up in Toledo, Ohio. And,
not far. Okay, great.
Yeah, and lived in the state of Ohio through high school. And then my mom moved out west, and that's how I got to Arizona State. And I chose a career in the private sector in business for a very simple reason. I needed the money. I really didn't know exactly what I was going to do. Growing up, my dad was a cop. I really appreciated his public service in doing that, but I wanted to do something more in the private sector and something competitive. So I did what a lot of you are doing right now. I've spent some time at Career Services. I had to work my way through college at Arizona State University. I wasn't really happy about it at the time, but I will tell you, I learned so much from having to go out and interview for a job with someone who wasn't a friend of my parents. I found a really good job with the Anheuser-Busch distributorship there in Arizona, and put me in a position where I could not only pay for my tuition, but have some spending money in my pocket. And then when I started to interview on campus, I found that I was getting offers from some of the most competitive companies because I really had a story to tell that others couldn't tell. So I think the idea of having the need to do that, and I started my career at Procter & Gamble, again in Ohio, but they put me in what was the most competitive marketplace in the world at the time, and it was Southern California. So I learned a lot there. Procter & Gamble is one of the finest consumer products companies on the globe, but I was in the food service category. So really what I learned at Procter & Gamble gave me the skills to build Cold Stone Creamery. We grew Cold Stone from one store in Tempe, Arizona to 1,440 stores operating in all 50 states. And today it operates in 31 countries around the world. So that's really my private sector story in a nutshell. And I had never been to Washington, D.C., believe it or not. And I went on a YPO educational trip after I'd sold my company when I was 45 years old. Came here, was fascinated about all the things going on in policy that I was unaware of, and went back and talked with Senator John Kyle, which is someone who I really respected him and his political positions, and he was very helpful to me in this next chapter of my life that's been in public service to date.
That's excellent. I mean, I'm sure we were going to touch a little bit on Cold Stone as well as your service to the state of Arizona, to the country. Tell me about a time, because we've all been through them. I've been through a pretty hard to believe devastating election loss a few years ago. We've all been through setbacks in our careers. We've all kind of learned from that. Could you tell me about a time you had a challenge or a setback and were really able to overcome it, and kind of what that path kind of took you from there?
Yeah, great question. And I think it's one that's tough to hear when you're younger, but I think it's so important that you hit a speed bump early on. So if you're in that situation, if you're in a crack or a rut, or you're down about some things that are going on, I really would encourage you to embrace that as an obstacle to overcome, because I think it'll give you confidence when you get out of your comfort zone in other situations. And one thing I always encourage people is this idea of leadership. If you do want to lead a company or you want to run for office someday, really what you are asking to do is to be selected as the leader. So the more situations you can put yourself in, voluntary situations where you're not the boss or not the leader, but you can persuade or lead that organization, those are really the skills that you will take, whether you run for governor or you build a consumer brand across the country. And I learned some of that the hard way, starting your career at a big multi country corporation. If you want to take on more responsibility, you need to get promoted. And I started entry level like everyone does at Procter & Gamble. And once I took on more responsibility, I thought this idea of being the boss with people that report to you would be different than how it is when you work in these voluntary settings. And I found out very quickly that good people do not work for command and control type leaders. And it was really the skills that I had learned along the way that served me best in both the private sector and the public sector. So whenever a young person comes to me and they're complaining about their boss, I tell them this is a gift. And may everyone have a bad boss at some point. You may not realize if your first boss is a great boss, you may not realize that this is an excellent manager and leader. And I think once you're talked to or treated in certain ways, and these are not ways that are illegal or that you would go to HR, they're just ways that discourage you or have you updating your resume or looking for work elsewhere, you will never be guilty of those types of things. And it really, in everything you do, whether it's in public policy or in the private sector, it is about people. And that's a cliche, and many people say it, but few people do it really well. And if you see anyone that's had any level of success, with very few exceptions, it's been the team they've been able to build around them and to bring an idea or a vision to life. And now and again, there will be an exception to that rule, but more often than not, it's the person that knows how to work with individuals. So I would say in terms of some tough times were when I wasn't getting what I wanted, my career was not progressing at the trajectory that I would like. And I look back and think, now, when I hit those types of situations, that I've got to think a little bit harder about how to overcome these obstacles and make that happen. And I think everybody faces that. And I think if you can master that skill, the real key for you going forward are options. You really want to have options upon graduation. And here I am now, many decades post-graduation, and still having options. And I think that's a real gift, and that will make your working life something that you look forward to. And there's nothing like being excited on Sunday night about Monday morning, especially if you've had the opposite, and then you know what a gift that is.
Yes, avoiding the Sunday scaries as something that you're excited about doing. And I can definitely vouch, having had some absent-minded professors as bosses, not any of them American University professors. I'll just not one of them that way. But yeah, you will have your bad bosses, and you can use it as a learning experience. You referenced a little bit Senator Kyle. Could you maybe talk to us a little bit about role models that you've had, maybe one within the corporate world that you have, and one maybe it is Senator Kyle or someone else as well, that also influenced you in your political development, and just how they may have been able to do that for you?
Yes, very important question. And I would really encourage all of you to find a mentor. And there are people out there that want to do that. I mean, nobody likes to tell their story more than an entrepreneur. They'll share with you everything that they know. And I have found this as well in politics. So I had never met Senator Kyle. I had never written him a check. And I called and set an appointment at his office and was candid and said I wanted to talk to him about entering public life. I expected to get 15 to 20 minutes, maybe not meet him, maybe meet with the staffer. And he gave me 90 minutes. And at the end of that meeting, he encouraged me to run for governor. He walked me around his office like I felt like I was his son-in-law. And I said, boy, I didn't expect this. And he said, well, we checked you out before you got here. And I said, well, there's a lot of people that want to run for governor, and I've never been in public life, and I really haven't even participated in that. And he encouraged, saying that outside experience sometime could be very innovative and change things, along with ask some tough questions along the way. Like, do you know if you have a legislative personality or executive personality? And I said, I know immediately, I have an executive personality. And then he responded, then don't even consider Congress or the Senate at this time, run for governor. So that was very helpful. And he has remained a mentor, but that was a very pleasant surprise from someone who was a very prominent senator at the time. There was no upside for John Kyle to take that meeting or give that encouragement. It was only that he cared about the state, and for whatever reason, he believed in me and wanted to invest that time. Those mentors are out there for you as well. And then the other person that I point to in the private sector was probably the toughest boss that I ever had, a guy named Larry Kelly at Procter & Gamble. He held everyone accountable. And many people, for whatever reason, didn't like him, and they didn't like that. He asked me what I wanted on our first day together, and I said I wanted to be promoted. And he said, are you thick-skinned or are you thin-skinned? And I said thick-skinned, and that was probably a mistake. But he then said, I will develop you if you'll listen and put the work in. And I look back in hindsight, and the promotion that I received in that next year and the responsibility I took on in the next 2 years was really, rather than finding an easier boss or a less competitive division, was Larry's mentorship and the fact that he would invest that kind of time in me. Now, that's the commitment you have to make depending on what you want to do in your career. And it reminds me of a presentation I saw just last year. It was Condoleezza Rice. I think most of you know who she was, Secretary of State in the Bush administration. Now she leads the Hoover Institute at Stanford. And she was on stage saying she gets to work with some of the finest young people in the country at Stanford. And they're all looking for meaning in their work. They're all interviewing, trying to find a career with meaning. And what she says to these students is what will be meaningful is that they pay you to do it. And I think that's what we're all in search of is purpose and meaning and mission. But that transition from American University to the outside is one that's very important, that launching from here. And that's why you being at career seminars like this, and I imagine the other services that are available on campus, the alumni you can take advantage of, and the successful people in your own family and personal network to take advantage of that. Because I don't know for certain, and I know your parents love you, but I imagine they don't want you moving back in after you've been here for 4 or 5 years. So if you can find that, it'll be good for you and it'll be good for them.
Absolutely. And I will say about Condoleezza Rice, one of the probably the only former Secretary of State that's been ever interviewed or considered to be the chief executive or a head coach of the Cleveland Browns. She's a huge Browns fan. She's one of our most prominent fans that we have out there. So we're very proud of her fandom, but was unable to get the head coaching position, although she probably would have done a lot better than Mr. Stefanski did last year. That's for sure. Let's talk about challenges, but also opportunities that kind of sometimes go hand in hand. Maybe looking at with both your corporate hat and also your government hat on. Obviously, there's been lots of challenges in government, in particular in the last 8 years or so when you've been in office. Now that you've kind of stepped out from that, talking about some of those challenges that you face that are still facing the state of Arizona or other governors, what opportunities might be out there, and then also maybe thinking about it again from that former entrepreneur, CEO hat as well. Challenges and opportunities are out there as we look at the economy, as we look at the world as it stands today. What do you kind of see from both perspectives?
There's an incredible amount of opportunity in our political environment right now. And I know it's not the most encouraging and aspirational time in our country's history, but in many ways, I think that's what calls for more engagement. It calls for more new people and young people to get involved and make the case. I think we are stuck in a cul-de-sac that is incredibly tribal right now, where people identify themselves by political party and are not really talking about the ideas, principles, or values that they believe in. They're talking about the other side and only making the case to stop them and really not to advance anything else. And I also think there's a real misunderstanding on our federal system. And we all wait every 4 years to elect a new king and hope that this individual housed right here in Washington, D.C. can make everything right. And I think part of the magic of our system is what can happen at the local level and the community level and the municipality level and at the state level. And that really is the great thing about being a governor. There are very few governors that are truly world famous in the political sense, unless they begin to run for president, because governors are by and large pretty collegial and they communicate with each other and they collaborate on certain things. And really at the end of the day, we're very competitive. I probably don't agree with Gavin Newsom on anything under the sun in terms of public policy. But if there's a wildfire in California, I'm on the phone with him and I'm sending Arizona firefighters and vice versa. And same with Jared Polis in Colorado. We also are able to be true laboratories of democracy. And you can innovate at the state level. And when I see a good idea in another state, when I ran in 2014, I ran on a platform that I'm going to take every good idea that's happening in Texas and apply it in Arizona. My opponent said he was going to take every good idea in California and apply it in Arizona. And I said, let's take that to the people and see what they think. But that's what you are able to do. And I think you can see governors out there trying to make the case. I spoke about this at the Reagan Library, that I think Americans are voting with their feet, and whether it be Arizona, Texas, Florida, or Tennessee, these are states that have net in-migration. And I think public policy has directly affected that, along with people's resulting quality of life. So I see that as a real opportunity to not be discouraged at this time, to be hopeful and aspirational, and to get in the fight. From a perspective of promoting your ideas. And, you know, at the end of the day, as an elected leader, you are in the business of persuasion. You should be trying to win people to your side. We all know in America, I used to say this during our large forums. I had about 14 people running in my first primary. I'd say, you know, the person with the most votes wins. So I thought I had the broadest agenda to build the largest coalition, and they were all things that I believed in. Other folks want to be one issue candidates. I don't think that's a path to success as a governor, who is really a chief executive of a state and being governor of all the people. And the great thing, if you do aspire to a job like this, is you get up every day and lace up your shoes and go out and affect the state that you love. If there's ideas you want to move forward, you get to advocate for those. If there's things you want to stop, you have an incredible platform. So I think it's important. I always say, John McCain used to say this at the end of an election cycle. He would say, the people have spoken. The bastards, depending on what the result was. But that's our system, and we embrace it. But to really watch the campaigns, because they are often a real insight into how someone will govern. And I think the campaign matters, the candidate, of course, matters, and then the circumstances that happen during that election cycle and seeing how they handle that in real time are the real opportunities and threats in front of us.
And a very poignant point you made about local and state really being impactful. I mean, everybody wants to, and you should care, obviously, what's happening in Washington, what's happening with the presidency and the elections and Congress and so forth. But what's happening in your everyday life is probably being more impacted by what Doug Ducey or Kevin Malecek does than what happens in Washington on a daily basis, even though that gets a lot of attention. Your daily lives, your civilization are really being impacted by the types of things we have done in office, no question. So you've had obviously two really rewarding chief executive experiences, governor of Arizona and CEO of Cold Stone. Can you pinpoint a couple of really rewarding experiences you've had within those kind of overarching, like really poignant, prominent moments that you had as governor that you just kind of sat there and were like, wow, I get to be in this position and this is really meaningful for my career, and perhaps the same thing as Cold Stone CEO?
Well, there's probably really too many to mention, because it's just such a great job. I think it's the best job in politics. But one thing that I want to say that I felt very honored to do as governor was when Senator McCain died. He began his funeral procession at the state capitol. And to eulogize such a great American and Arizonan as John McCain was something that I'll never forget. And like I said, I felt very honored to be able to do that, to come to the National Cathedral, which I had never been to, for the state funeral. And it was something very special to be a part of. Of course, the country was terribly divided at the time, and so was the Republican Party. But to see people gather in that setting, and I thought this during the funeral services, if Shakespeare could have even written a play where he would have had the two opponents who he lost to when he ran for president in 2000 and 2008, and he was eulogized by George W. Bush and Barack Obama. And it was one of those moments where you leave, of course, saddened for the loss, but you think that the country really saw an example of service like we haven't in our lifetime. And Terry McAuliffe, who's the former governor of Virginia, used to have this great opening line where he would say, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, McAuliffe. and that's Virginia. And I always thought that was really fun. Arizona is the newest and youngest state in the lower 48. We don't have that kind of background. We're rather fresh on the scene. And John McCain is in that pantheon of giants for our state. So that to me would be something that I'll remember forever.
I don't know, Governor. You have Goldwater, Domenici, Ducey. I mean, there's a
Well, I would definitely put Barry Goldwater in there as well. Now, I think Pete was our neighbor in New Mexico.
He was in the Senate when I was at American. One of my most poignant experiences at American was actually getting to meet Senator McCain at a filming of Meet the Press right down the street from campus there. So truly a really great man.
Yes.
Was there anything that you would say during your college experience, sitting out in this audience as everybody else is sitting out there today, that you wish you knew about your career progression, sitting here several years later? Boy, I really wish I would have, if I was sitting in these same seats as these students here today, I wish I would have known this. What would you say that might be?
I would say that it's a journey and not a destination. I am and I was very goal oriented. I didn't have the option to move home upon graduation. I was going to get a job. I set my goals on a monthly basis. Later in life, I set them on a quarterly basis. As governor, you basically write a state of the state, and those are your goals for the year. I would also do them personally, and I think that's a good habit to have. I think it's having that to-do list is important. But there are many times where I would think, when I get here, everything will be great. When I get to this destination, there will be nothing to worry about. And that's not necessarily true. And I still feel like I've got another act or two in me, and I want to enjoy this part of the journey. And I think that probably hit me about mid-50s, because my first inauguration was, of course, an event that was important to me and important to my family. And I didn't have much of a memory of it because there was so much going on in my mind in terms of the upcoming budget and state of the state. And I really thought of the inauguration as just a ceremonial to do. And on the second inauguration, knowing in Arizona we have term limits, that there wasn't going to be a third, I thought I really want to enjoy this and I want my family to enjoy it. And I think that having that kind of mindset right now on what you're doing with your life and your career and your social settings will just bring a lot more enjoyment and deeper relationships. And you can still get to whatever destination that you want. And then it'll be about what's next.
That's excellent. I really want to open it up, obviously, to the students that are here today. Their questions are probably the most important. But before I go ahead and do that and turn it over, what would you say, this is a really important question, your all-time favorite Cold Stone concoction is? And that's really, really essential for us all to know if we're going to go visit one and be like, we would like the Ducey special. What would that be?
Well, my partner was Don Sutherland. He opened the first store at Southern and McClintock, and I opened the first franchise, and then we were 50-50 partners in the brand. And his concoction was Founder's Favorite, which is delicious and a lot of people love. Mine was Chocolate Devotion, and I'm a big chocolate fan. But I do think one of the best innovations that we brought, in addition, this was rather new when we opened Cold Stone and started franchising in 1997. 31 flavors was thought as something, one different flavor for each day of the month was their idea. And this was where you could come in and customize. But I think if you haven't had a Cold Stone cake, I'd get the chocolate ganache cake. I still think that's still what I get for my birthday every year. And I think was a heck of an innovation.
Now I'm going to have to go out to the local one and see if I can get one of those this afternoon. But Amy, I don't know if we can open it up to questions there. I'm
Let's
sure
do
we got
that.
some
Kevin,
great ones.
we want you to stick around because we
Oh,
want to gather your expertise on all this
Sure.
too. Okay, gang, who's got a question for the governor? I know you're not shy.
Yeah.
And it can be about anything. That's why we love bringing in Governor Ducey too, because he has such a vast, career. So. Caleb.
I'll start us
Yes.
off. My name is Caleb Brown. I am from Austin, Texas, and I'm a graduate student here at AU studying political communication. I was wondering, so your first seminar, you talked a lot about your campaign and your campaign staff and how excellent your staff was and how important that was to have those relationships around you. I was wondering, as someone who is potentially interested in doing campaign work, like what are the best qualities you see when surrounding yourself with people for a campaign?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Caleb. And I always say to political science majors, I don't know if there's any in the audience here, you will really not get the value out of your education if you don't go work on campaigns. And your first,
Kevin's nodding.
yeah.
True, yeah.
And your first campaign, you're likely going to walk in and they're going to have you do grunt work. And if you show up every day on time and work hard, there will be openings quickly, and you will be able to do field work and communications work and work around the candidate. So I would really encourage that. So I think someone who is just eager, hungry, and wants to be in that space is number one. And two, I would say it's hard to pick the winner in any of these campaigns, but I would for sure pick someone that you believe in. Try to get on a campaign where someone's representing things that you want to see happen. And if you are successful in that pursuit, I can't tell you how many people have become part of our extended Ducey administration team that began as entry level or first job in that 2014 race. And there's all kinds of different career opportunities. I'm sure Kevin and Amy can speak to those, but getting involved in that campaign, and of course you want to win that campaign. The candidate likely wants to win it as well. And I talked about that 2014 primary where we had 14 opponents. Upon winning that nomination, we hired the best people from the competing campaigns, and they came on our team and have remained until 2023. So winning isn't everything in that situation, especially starting your career. It's really learning, gaining experience, and just building that skill set along with your personal behavior. I do think you're going to have very tough people in the role of campaign manager that are going to have expectations that you behave like a professional and an adult.
Kevin, what would you add? Anything to?
No, I would just echo the governor's comments. You really need to get an experience of what it's like a day. I mean, it is a grind to work on a campaign, to volunteer, to whatever, but you also really have to discover about yourself. And if it's a situation that you want to work just on campaigns, you want to be the behind the scenes person, or as I know a lot of people at American want to do, they might want to run themselves. That's a great testing ground to really kind of determine which way you might want to go with it. Or maybe you do both. You've got people that it doesn't happen as often, moving from campaign manager to actually being a candidate. Normally it's kind of one path or the other, but getting that experience, meeting people on the trail, getting your taste of what it's like to fundraise as both potentially as a candidate, but also as a staffer. Those are really important elements to trying to decide which way you want to kind of go with your career.
Well, there's one other thing I want to add to what Kevin said. I think the other important thing about getting involved in a campaign is you see what it's really like and how it really works. There is not a lot of glamour in a campaign. There's a lot of energy and there's a lot of wonderful people, but it is very hard work for very low pay. It's good training for becoming an entrepreneur. But I also think that you will make a much more informed decision should you choose to pursue that career path or run for office. You'd be much more knowledgeable had you worked on a campaign or two.
I have to ask you, Governor, as somebody who's worked in the private sector, I have found that when I'm hiring too, people who have worked on campaigns, and Kevin, you can answer this too, like that grind, that work ethic does translate to other sectors too. Like people see that on the resume and say, oh no, they know how to work hard. They know how to be flexible, right? Because it's never what you want to do on a campaign. It's what they need you to do, right? That becomes your job. So
yeah, there's just no doubt about it. I think if you do go to the private sector, you never really want to say that's not my job. You know, you want to take on more responsibility and have more of an attitude of what more can I contribute on a campaign. If it's a good campaign, that's the culture. You know, what needs to be done, who can do it. There's very little structure. Maybe the campaign manager does sit in that role of they are the boss, but everyone else is pretty much an all hands on deck type situation to bring the candidate's message to life. And you will hit all kinds of obstacles and things that you didn't see. You have to react to the news of the day. You have to react to what your opponents are saying. Social media has complicated and scrambled all of that. But like I said, when I was running the first time, I had a 23-year-old just graduated young woman from Washington and Lee University, and this was her first job. And she was basically my driver, my fundraiser, my treasurer, and my campaign manager. And she had worked for John Shattuck in college. John Shattuck was our congressman, and he was retiring at the time. And I said, what is John Shattuck going to do that could possibly be more fun than this? And that's really what I thought of the campaign. And I only had one staffer at the time. She's still with me. Luckily, it was a very good hire. She's excellent at what she does. But what she brought was really a work ethic and the willingness to learn, and some good people around us in an extended team, which were not part of paid staff, that she would ask questions. And we built winning campaigns from there.
absolutely. And you're very fortunate at AU because between the Career Center and the incredible alumni network who can get you on campaigns, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of doors that
Yes, for sure.
Okay, who's next?
So,
Tyler.
I don't know if you yourself lost a campaign, but like I've worked on multiple campaigns that didn't make it out of the primary successfully. So like what advice would you say to like a student who worked hard, wanted that win, they lost, and kind of like, I don't know if I want to stay in politics, or I don't know if I can go for these defeat after defeat after defeat and have a job for 4 months, 3 months, and then be unemployed.
So I haven't had that experience. But of course, I mean, this is a pursuit for risk takers. This is a very entrepreneurial business. And I think it's a very tough business. It really brings out the best of the candidates' energies and skills. And then the people speak. And like I said, I gave you John McCain's comment after many election cycles. So I actually do think there is a ton of learning in pursuit of a worthy cause, even when you don't hit what you want. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt spoke about it much more eloquently than I am. And I think if you stay in this business long enough, you are going to face defeats. Even I didn't face a defeat at the ballot box. I didn't get everything I wanted as governor. So there are plenty of times where you're going home discouraged. You know, I would say some days you eat the bear and other days the bear eats you. You weren't the candidate in those situations. You were working on those campaigns. You were gaining experience. Even if you are the candidates, I mean, some of our, most successful leaders have experienced tremendous defeat along the way. Winston Churchill, in his experience in World War I versus, saving the Western Hemisphere in World War II. So I would look at it as, like I said, part of the journey. It happened for a reason. You don't have to dwell in it or have it define you, but it will inform you for what's next. And I think sometimes that humility from not getting what you want makes you the better advisor or the better candidate.
Can I indulge here? Because
Yes.
unlike you, Governor Ducey, I've lost more than I've won. But I think the other thing that to go to your point about candidates, I worked for Secretary John Kerry, who lost his presidential race in 2004. And I remember the day of the concession speech. I had been traveling with him on the plane the whole year. So we'd spent all this time together, the entire team. And, people who know me know I'm a crier. So I was crying, we're at the concession speech, and he looked at me and he said, "Dry your eyes, we've got work to do." And I looked at him like, maybe he was just a little, because I'm like, our job's done. Like, he goes, no, we have work to do. And I think that vision of, if you believe, campaigns are about believing in policy and process and values. And so if you do that, you can pick yourself up and there's always work to be done. Right, Kevin?
I'll comment on that as both a candidate who's lost. I'm 5-2, but also as someone working on a campaign. I would say from the campaign worker, campaign manager, you lose campaigns. That's fine. I know some of the most successful campaign managers in the United States right now are people that have lost races, and not just lost one or two, maybe several. And I think they are actually viewed as people that have kind of earned their stripes. They've gotten their war wounds and they've learned so much, and that's made them really successful campaign managers for prominent congressional races, Senate races, gubernatorial races, presidential races. That's part of it. And having been a candidate that lost an election that I was, everybody thought I was going to win, outspent our opponent like 15-1. I lost because of a national trend. Trump won our county, had formerly been very purple. He won it by 15 points. I lost by 2. Hillary lost by 10 in our county. So there was a national trend, and you can do everything right. And this is the case in all aspects of life. You can do everything right, and sometimes things just don't work out your way. And you know what? That's life. And you have to pick up yourself from that, and you move on to the next thing. It's not easy to do. You're welcome to cry. You're welcome to mourn for a bit. That's part of the deal. But you really just got to work on picking yourself up. And are those the types of experiences that make your life richer and contribute to your career progression from there?
And I'll add to that a little bit. There's an axiom among campaign professionals that says, never trust anyone until you see them finish strong in pursuit of a worthy cause that loses. That will really build your reputation. I'll give you one of my personal experiences. The first time I ran was in 2010. And when you run for state treasurer and the sitting governor likes you, you get invited on the state plane occasionally to go to campaign stops. John McCain was a senator at that time, and he had really no opponent in his general. The challenge was in his primary, and he won it by a large margin. And it was just the previous cycle that he had a crushing to defeat for president to Barack Obama. And if you know John McCain's life story and the former president's life story up to that point, he could have found all reasons to unplug, to retire, to be bitter. And he was so engaged in his role as a senator and representing the cause of the right. And he had so much fun campaigning. I mean, it really was a lesson for me to enjoy this and embrace it. He brought a real spirit and love of life on the campaign trail. And those of you that know anything about Senator McCain, he ran into people that loved him and people that felt the other way. And he enjoyed both settings and encounters the same, and he never shied away from confrontation.
So, hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a staff member and graduate student. My capstone actually focuses on the relationship between private and public sector. And I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs as well as public officials who talk a lot about like the issue with them having that overlap coming from like just discernment, practicing like different levels of like just discernment and how they interact with individuals, interact with communities that they serve. So have you seen that discernment in yourself going from private to public? Do you see a change in your tone and things you can talk about, especially because a lot of the entrepreneurs I've talked to stop focusing on the numbers and start focusing on like, the community. So like, how do you practice that discernment in your?
I think it's the perfect word, this idea of discernment. And it's why I encourage so many young people, if you do want to run for office, to go do something else before you do, because really the skill isn't winning the election and winning re-election. It's what you do once you are elected. And it's hard sometimes to discern in the public eye, but if you do have those experiences before you run for office and have some success, you develop some of those judgment skills. You also develop the ability to make better decisions, to select the right people for the right positions. And that allows you to make the proper decisions and have the right judgment for what you want to do. You will be exposed if you run. And I'm not saying that from a fear standpoint, but you better know what you believe before you run for office. And I think the leadership skills that you can develop, the people selection skills, the communication skills, you have all kinds of time to do that now and in the first part of your career. That's why I encourage people to build a business, turn a school around, join the military, all of those types of settings. You can develop all those skills. You can even develop those certainly on a campaign staff, and then make the judgment on running for office. And I think there's a couple of things. If people were really caring about you and your personal best interest versus just wanting to win the office, they would want you to know that it's a personal decision and that timing matters and that you get to make the decision to run or not. It's your name on the ballot and you don't owe anybody to do that. So it's got to be something that you own. And then once you do it, you're going to be held accountable because they will count the votes.
Who's next?
Yeah, so it's not really career, it's family, but family's important, right?
Yes.
You were governor, of course, but you're also a dad.
Yes.
And I'm interested in knowing, I remember I watched the documentary where Mitt Romney said that, like having kids when you're in politics is really hard. And he even like advises people like, don't get involved if you're too young and so on. How is that decision with your family, with your core to run for governor? Was anyone like, no, don't do it?
So I think it's a great question. It's really important, especially once you do start a family. I mean, for me, it's a priority. It's the priority. I had 3 young sons when I made the decision to run. They were involved in the decision. And it was part of the reason that the job that I wanted was governor. The job that was open was state treasurer. And in many ways, these are treasurer's a great job. It's a responsibility. You're a fiduciary to the state. You manage $13 billion. And it's important that good people run for these offices. But you're basically a busy chief executive. So part of the reason that I was attracted to that office, Phoenix is the capital city. It's where we live, 20 minutes away from our house. I was home in the morning. I was home at night, and I was able to pay real attention. Now, all governors are busy, and I was busy as well. But I think sometimes they play a game as if they're busier than you can understand. There's really only one commitment that a governor has on an annual basis, and it's State of the State on the second Monday of January. After that, your time is your own. So every time we would get our kids' schedule, the back to school things, the games that they had, well, you have schedulers, and our schedulers went to work, and I missed very little. So to me, governor was the job that would allow me to do that. My boys, I would defer to them on what they would say, but we've had a lot of discussions about this, and I think they enjoyed a lot of what we were able to do. I saw that same interview with Mitt Romney, and I do think when you run for the top job, that is a different deal. That is a different deal. My wife, Angela, while the first lady of Arizona, chose to not have any of the trappings of security or an office or DPS. She worked on child protective services and foster care, and I think reformed it to as a model across the country. But she chose not to do that, and no one thought less of that. If anything, people applauded that. She just didn't want to participate. She doesn't like politics. Thank goodness she still likes me.
Do you have anything?
No, I think talking to your family, I've mentioned this when I've taught in SPA before, that you've got a bunch of people that you need to talk to before you decide to run for office, but that absolutely needs to be first. They need to be okay with the decision, you know, depending on what type of campaign it's going to be, they could be drug into it. If they've got skeletons and issues and things like that, you know, very little is untouchable nowadays with social media and with other types of media attention. So they need to be invested in as much as you are. And I applaud. It's refreshing to hear Governor Ducey saying how much time he spent with them, because I think there's a lot of people that are in this business that neglect that. And so it's refreshing to hear that.
I've said before that politics is a really good profession for people that have a miserable home life. Because you can be gone morning, noon, and night.
Mhm.
So if you don't prioritize and carve that out, it will get eaten up. And I've told the story before, and I say it somewhat tongue in cheek, but it's true. You get to do some unbelievable things if you're successful in the campaign. And one for me was to be able to go to the White House for dinner. There's a state dinner every year with the president. And I was able to bring my wife, Angela, the first 2 years. And the boys thought that was really cool at the time. They were now in high school. And as we were considering re-election, I was able to say, you know, guys, I would like to take all 3 of you to the White House dinner as well, along with Noni, who's what we call my mom. But to do that, I've got to win re-election. And I don't know what you think about it. And they're like, run, Dad, run. But I was able to deliver on that commitment. They've all been able to have dinner at the White House. And I was able to take my mom to the White House, and my younger brother will never be able to one up that.
Another question. Yes.
Sometimes people will stay in a job or a sector until they retire. And I was wondering what kind of pushed you to take the risk to enter the public sector? And did you have a backup plan in case it failed?
Boy, that's a great question. I had sold my company at the time, so I was doing some board work and some investing. I knew I was going to do something else. I didn't think it would be politics. So it was, in a sense, at age 45, a real fresh opportunity to do this. And that's where I think the goal setting and having some of the mindfulness of really knowing what you want, what drives your ambition and desires, and then making sure you're communicating with whoever you're partnering with in life at the time allows you to make better decisions along the way. The other thing I'll say about the Mitt Romney question and your family, I do think, losing, of course, is tough on a candidate. I think it's tougher on a family. And I was the first governor in Arizona to have teenagers in the age of social media. And that was a challenge that no one really anticipated. And I wanted my boys to be teenagers. I mean, I'm the one who ran for office. They didn't. So these are some of the things that even the best laid plans, you don't necessarily foresee, but they're part of the things that you should understand going in somewhat eyes wide open. But I think if you have that real understanding of what you want to do and why you want to do it, that's what I really enjoyed. Is there were things I think that should be left to the states. And I do think the governors should compete, and the governors also interact. And I think we rely too much on Washington, D.C. We ask it to do too much. It does most of it poorly. And if they could focus on national defense and reforming our immigration system and a secure border and some fiscal sanity in our national treasury, and then making sure that our social safety nets that have been created because we're the most prosperous country in the history of the world, I think they'd have a much more targeted to-do list. And then really, I think the states, you'd have even better people running for office, and you would see a lot of good things coming out of our state legislature. And I do think you see that around the country, but even when people of my belief in more of a focus on the community than on the national government get to Washington, D.C., I oftentimes think that they have Potomac fever and think every problem needs to be solved from the halls of Congress. And I just don't think we have much evidence of that working.
Another question? We have time.
My name's Sarah Gaines. I'm a master's student here. And how did you manage to completely change your career midlife from going private sector and being CEO of a company to work a completely different job? And did you see a lot of similarities between being executive of a private company and executive of the city?
Sarah, that's a question that a lot of business people ask me, because I think anybody that's run anything or at any level of success has thought about possibly running for office. They may never do it, but they've thought about it, because think of our biographies and great stories of leaders are almost all people that have been in a position of public responsibility. We have it for our own country, but of course, over the sands of time as well. And that's why I encourage people to do something before they run for office, because I really think, at least in the governor's job, it is a chief executive officer's role. You are you're signing up for a leadership position. You're going to make the decision on the 35,000 people that work in state government. Of course, not on every one, but when you make the right call on your chief of staff, when you make the right decision for cabinet secretary, when you make the right decision for agency heads, all kinds of good things happen in those agencies. And I have all kinds of evidence of that. And when you make the wrong decision, things really go wrong in that agency. And I have evidence of that as well. And the press will never celebrate your good decisions, but they will hang you out to dry for the missed ones. So I really didn't see it as a change of career path. I saw it as an amplification of the skills that I already had. And in many ways, if you run for public office, it will only make you more of what you already are. That's why I say you will be exposed in this business. If you're someone who wants to get things done and you bring goodwill and want to be governor of all the people, that will be exposed. But if you are someone that just wants to be elected and you really don't know how to pick people yet or make decisions, that will also be exposed. So I think it's a great career path and opportunity. I also think if you can have the flexibility and the mindset that you don't identify yourself by that job, and you can be willing to come from the private sector, the public sector, and then possibly return. That was much more of our model upon the beginning. And I do think we have some really good folks that are in elective office for a long time, but we also have the alternative. I'm someone, I believe in term limits for the executive branch. I wish we had more senators that wanted to be senators, rather than using the Senate as a platform to run for president. That's part of the problem that I see right now. George Will wrote an article in the Washington Post saying there should be a constitutional amendment that anyone that runs for the Senate and wins forecloses on the opportunity to ever run for president. And I do think we'd have a more and better and functioning and deliberative Senate than we have today. But that's not going to happen anytime soon. So we've got to make those decisions. And we do have term limits in the Senate they're called elections. So that's how you remove a bad senator and put in somebody who actually wants to do the work.
Thank you. I will just say to Kevin, I don't know if 21-year-old Kevin knew he'd be a city council person, right? Like, I don't know if 21-year-old Doug Ducey knew he'd be a governor. So I think there's also being flexible and open, like, you don't know sometimes when you're where your career will take, and you have to be open to that. Did you think about that when you were at this stage? Like, you had it all planned out, or were you like?
I mean, I would say, I knew I wanted to run for office. I mean, I went to American with the same, oh, I'm gonna be a cabinet secretary, oh, I'm gonna be in Congress, whatever, you know, yeah. I'm obviously not that right now. I never thought I would be. I'm doing economic development, international trade work now. And even 10 years ago, I would have said, you're crazy if you think I'm going to be doing that job. So the governor said it very well before, it is about the journey. And your journey is going to take you in a lot of different paths. And you could find you're doing something that you couldn't even picture now in 5 or 10 or 20 years down the line that you really enjoy, that you're really good at. And then those things that you enjoy and are good at, you can make money at as well. That's also a great thing, obviously, for your career progression. But yeah, you don't know where things are going to take you, but it's important to take risks. Governor mentioned that as well, especially if people like to run for office. But yeah, you don't know exactly where you're going to end up, and it's important to embrace that.
Would you say the same?
Oh, without a doubt. Well, I think Kevin said it very, very well. And I think all the opportunities you have here as well. I mean, you're at a university in the nation's capital, but I imagine you have friends and peers from all over the country. And that is really something special coming out of school. So maintaining that network and building on those relationships will open all kinds of doors in the coming decades. And you just can't see that. I think in many ways, someone that knows exactly what they want to do and who they want to be when they're 21 is in for a lot of disappointment.
Well, I will say what someone once said to me, don't look at it like a ladder, it's more like a jungle gym, right? And if you look at it like a ladder, like you're gonna miss some of those opportunities. So can we thank both Governor
Thank you.
are an incredible resource. We're incredibly proud to have you as a double eagle, Kevin. And I just want to say, since this is our last session together, Governor Ducey, it has been an honor to have you here on campus, and you were so dedicated and came to every single event and engaged with students. But you can't quit me. So now you're a part of the Sine Institute for Life, and we will look forward to having you back and like engaging with the students in different ways. And as we follow what you're doing next and highlight to everybody the incredible work that you'll continue to do. If I could just take a minute before we break, we do have Lisa's with us from the Alumni Association. I wanted to share with you, I think even Kevin, you might be surprised to know that obviously networking is such a big piece of the job search. I think you'd be surprised to know there are over 145,000 American University alumni worldwide. That is an incredible resource to all of you. So you have to take advantage of that part of this special supportive group. So here's the thing that the Alumni Association wants you to know. There's a lot of information here. Please pick it up as you go. Visit the Career Center for information as well. But for current students, you can connect with alumni through programs such as the Dinner with Alumni. That's in the summer in February. You can join the Student Alumni Association. Alumni Fire is that communication platform for AU students and alumni, so you can find a lot of information on there. And for alumni or soon to be alumni, if you're staying in DC, there is an incredible DC Young Alumni chapter. That's an important resource. So remember that, especially for some of you who might be seniors this year. And if you're leaving the area, there's of course alumni communities and across the US, and the Alumni Association is there to help connect you. So get involved with one of our many alumni affinity groups and networks. Stay connected with Alumni Fire and the LinkedIn and alumni group and social media. And for more details, visit the table and certainly reach out to alumni@american.edu. And if you're a single eagle like me, sometimes you can come back and work at the university. So where there's so many opportunities, I'm really proud of the experiences and the opportunities that American gave to me. My very first job I got at the Career Center in politics was through the Career Center here at American University. So use what you have. Again, Governor Ducey, Kevin Malecek.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Honor to meet you.